right, hello everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So today we are diving into the second part of this two-part workshop series on creating a new relationship blueprint. So last workshop we were focused on sort of the old narrative, using art to unearth all the different messages that you received. And this workshop is really focused on what does it mean to create a new narrative? What does it mean to envision a new empowered narrative? So in a few moments, we're going to be doing some breakout rooms before we go through a visualization experience. But before that, I'd love to start things off with some journaling so you can just get warmed up and sort of reflecting and in the zone. And so I'll just read off the questions for you to reflect, and you can just journal in your own time. So the first question to reflect on is, what parts of your old blueprint or old relationship narrative do you want to shift or begin to release? Right, so anything around your old blueprint or old relationship narrative that you just want to let go of, move forward, learn from, what are you wanting to release? And then the second question, what part of you wants to stay with this old relationship blueprint or this old way of showing up? So what's the benefit of staying stuck in this pattern? Right? So maybe there's a part of you that's comfortable with the status quo. Maybe there's a part of you that's been protecting you and wants you safe. So like, what's this part of you that's totally happy for you to stay in this old way of being? And we're just going to make some space to welcome that. And so then the third question, sort of in contrast to that, what is a part of you that is ready and willing to let go of that old narrative, the old stories, the old ways of being? And what's telling you this part is ready? So for example, like maybe there's a part of you that maybe you've had a lot of toxic relationships in the past, and there's a part of you that just is like, no more, I deserve more, and I love myself so deeply, I'm going to take a stand for that. So maybe love is the part of you that's willing to create this new narrative. Or maybe there's a part of you that's just tired of this old way of being, and they're sick and tired of it. And so now that's going to motivate you. So what's this part that's ready and willing to let go? And then finally, the fourth question is, what are you calling in instead? Right? So what sort of new narrative, new way of being, a new way of approaching relationships do you want to live and embody in your life? So in terms of what do I mean by calling in, this is really, so it's sort of what is the type of relationship that you're calling in terms of like, I want to be someone who communicates really clearly. I want to be someone with healthy boundaries, or I'm calling in greater compassion for myself or self-forgiveness. So what are sort of ways of being that you're wanting to step into, right? Or calling into your life. I'll give you like a little sort of summary of what to expect so you kind of know the purpose behind it and can kind of rest into that. And so I'll be leading this visualization where essentially you'll be able to connect to sort of an imaginary village or community of sort of like ideal caretakers and neighbors and community members. And then we'll have you imagine like different stages of your development. So you'll depict like your baby self or your teenager self, whatever self, right? You'll imagine that in front of you. And if you were that community, right, of empowered, loving beings, what would be the messages you would speak and teach to those different stages of yourself, right? And so this is just an exercise of, from this place, what would have been your relationship blueprint, right, from these empowered, loving beings and community members, and then just seeing how that lands, and what do you learn from that, and how can you take that into like, oh, this is what my takeaway is, like, this is the new message that I want to keep, teaching myself or holding myself in. So that's sort of the meta picture, so you kind of know in terms of what to expect for that. So for this part, you're welcome to whatever way feels internal for you. So that might be just sitting where you are. That might be journaling while I'm talking. That might be laying on your back or sitting in a meditative space with your eyes closed. So just take a moment and notice what feels really good to you. And you can kind of go in and out of either space depending on what calls to you. So I'll give you a moment to get set up in whatever way feels supportive for you there. Alrighty. So I'm just going to take a moment. I'm going to actually share sound in a moment as well. So I'm just doing that behind the scenes. All right. So I'll just have a little music kind of going underneath. And if ever you can't hear my voice, send me a little message and let me know. And so just taking a moment to settle into whatever position feels supportive for you, whether that's eyes open or gently closed. And just noticing if your body needs to stretch or release or kind of shake things out. And then before we dive into the visualization, just taking a moment and tune into a quality that you want to infuse this experience. Maybe that's love, compassion, clarity, courage, whatever that is. Let yourself tune into that. And so now you're going to be invited onto a little journey. So just taking a moment to imagine what it would be like if you were raised by a community of people who were loving, super compassionate, kind, relationship positive, sex positive, good communicators, nonviolent communicators, right? Just this community of really wonderful human beings. And you might want to imagine them around you or just where they're living, them walking around, but just see what it's like to tune into who these people might be, what they might look like. Right, so if you're envisioning, you can envision that. If you're writing, feel free to describe them. And then just noticing if you are surrounded by these types of people, just noticing how your body is responding to that. Is it feeling soft? Is it at ease? Is there relaxation? So just trusting whatever's coming up for you around just these really loving, caring, evolved humans. And so with this empowered community standing behind you, we're going to go through a process where you imagine different stages of your life. So we can start off by imagining like baby you, like a little infant. You can cradle them in your arms and kind of look down at yourself, right? Just this sweet baby version of you. And you just feel like all that love. And with that evolved, loving community behind you, with yourself holding this baby version of yourself, what would you whisper to this child? What words of love, affirmation, care? You can speak that out loud, you can journal it, or just imagine yourself saying that to this little baby of you. Right? You might be whispering, you're so loved, you're so worthy, you're deserving of care. got you. What messages are you telling this baby version of you? Right, and just notice we're beginning to fast forward time, just honoring that, right? And that little baby, maybe it crawls out of your hands, it's toddlering it around, maybe it's 4 or 5 years old, kind of exploring the world. Just imagining that community of caring, loving human beings all around you, you yourself looking at this 3, 4, 5-year-old version of yourself. What are the words that you're saying to this little one around love, relationships, care, deservingness? And speak it out loud, or just envision this community interacting with that young child version of you. And so letting time fast forward a little bit more, watching that younger version of you begin to grow. Maybe you're getting into pre-puberty, puberty, right? Ages 12, 13, 14. Maybe your voice is changing, hormones are happening, menstrual cycle, if that's showing up, your body's changing, right? And if you are the adult and this loving community is around this version of you, what are they saying? What are they teaching you about your body's changes? What are they talking about around maybe curiosity around sexuality, dating as a kid, love, deservingness? What messages would this loving community say or act out with this young preteen? You can speak that out loud, envision, describe it. And continuing to watch that young version of you grow, right? Moving from preteen to maybe teenager, right? Maybe honoring there's a lot of emotions happening, growth happening, you know, teens acting like teenagers. And what would it be like if this loving, evolved community was just like, we see you, we hear you? What would that community share around talking about your emotions or anger or dating, sexuality, relationship expectations? What would that community be saying in support of teenage you? right? And you might even be noticing, right, what are the questions this teenager has? How do the adults in this community answer them? Right? And then just watch this teenager version of you begin moving into early adulthood, increasing their independence, trying new things, moving out in the world. Right? And how does the community show up for them? How do you show up? What do you say to them around love, relationships, gender, sexuality, desirability, worthiness? What messages do you say to that young adult? Right. And now just sort of intuitively fast forwarding to whatever age feels important. So it might be later adulthood, it might be a significant relationship or something that didn't work out in a relationship, but just imagining that version of you. And then just imagining this evolved, loving community of loving beings, of yourself so wise around relationships, love, care. What would they speak to you? How would they show up for you during that time? Speak it out, describe it, imagine it. Right. And finally, if it calls to you, just bring in front of you your current self, right? Just envision yourself as you are right now. Just look upon you and just call upon that community of beings right behind you and just speak out what messages of love, affirmation, care, support, validation do you need to hear from this loving, compassionate community? Right, so just acknowledging this little bit of a journey you've been on, acknowledging that current self. And then what is it like to notice that community that you imagined, those loving beings, that version of yourself, and just breathing that back into yourself, kind of feeling that empowered, loving narrative kind of embodying in your center. Noticing any new learnings, any shifts of what it's like to just breathe in this new way of being, having been raised or supported by these types of beings. And in these final few minutes, you have the option, right, of staying in this envisioning state, this meditative place, or you can also go back to journaling. And you can journal it out or speak it out loud. What are the new empowered messages around relationships and love that will help you thrive? So what are the new empowered messages around relationships and love that will help you thrive? And so from this place, begin to write that down or just speak it out loud so you can witness yourself or just imagine it. Right, and then just coming into this final reflection question. What advice or messages does this empowered self have for you moving forward in love and relationships? Maybe it's just encouragement, maybe it's something else. What are some final nuggets, messages, or advice for how can you move forward now? Right, and so this gently, we're going to begin closing out this reflection, this visualization, meditative process. And so if you've been moving or reflecting or envisioning, just slowly begin coming back. If you're still writing, you can continue your writing, but just bringing some movement back to your body. If you want to stretch or yawn, or even give yourself a little bit of a hug. Yeah. Yeah, if there's like a hug feels good, or just squeezing parts of your body as you're coming back, right? Just showing yourself a little care for this little journey that we've been on together. And so I'm wondering if, yeah, maybe we'll start off with just opening it to larger group shares and then see on time if we do smaller breakout rooms. But I'd just be curious to hear check-ins from folks into terms of like how that was for you, what's present, just acknowledging many experiences could have happened. And it's all really welcome. Yeah, Roland. Acknowledging that part of this process is that there is a point where we kind of have to recalibrate and internalize like our own best parents, right? Our own best community, right? And really begin to embody those messages. And it can be really hard. And that's why the visualization and what does it mean to bring all of that on board so you can really begin sort of rewiring your system with that. And acknowledging that it's not necessarily easy. Like I'm noticing some nodding with that. And I actually think that some of what's happening right in these communal spaces in Kindra. And so we actually are at the forefront of reimagining what community looks like, what relationships look like, right? And so that does take a kind of collective imagining. And so what does it mean to lean in and sort of be messy together and sort of, be drawn to whatever configurations and learn from there. But like a lot of us, we're figuring it out. And there can be a lot of like frustration and grief around that because it was like, shit, I didn't have anyone to lean on. Like I had to teach myself this and that. And that's why I floundered. And so just having for compassion for that. And like, thank goodness this space happens. There's other space happening that we're like beginning to really lean into this. We're all reimagining this. And society isn't structurally set up for us to necessarily succeed in a lot of ways in relationships, right? So what does it mean to even shift that? And I think it's once again, it's that level, that perfectionism that's really seeped into so many aspects of this. And it's like, it messes with our brains. And like, I think a little bit, Roxanne had shared about like space and a little bit what you shared, Catherine. It's just sort of like, it just feels like if there's more space for all of us to kind of sit with it and be confused or make a mistake and not just like react and just be like, oh, what happened? Okay, learning something new. Of course, my younger self didn't know how to act better. I wasn't taught that. And do we have space to kind of grieve that, process that, be angry about that, and invite in joy, that playfulness and that collective joy, right? There's so much nourishment there. And one of the things I like love about play is that like play is like the antithesis to perfectionism, right? Because if you really are like, this is a play space where you get to fall forward and make mistakes and go gung-ho and test it out and wrestle, right? And all of that. And you get to learn. Like there's so much that is learned in a space of play because you're not being like whacked for not being correct. So I think that invitation into playfulness is awesome. And how can we bring that in as we like collectively learn in a painful but playful way, right? And just hold all of it. I definitely think it's really beautiful that you're like cultivating that in yourself. And what does it mean to find people who are able to do that, right? Or can people learn and grow in that, or it's like, or are there other people who are more apt at doing that? So it's definitely an exploration that many of us have to go through. Finding new modeling is so important. New York Times opinion section, mourning the loss of the romantic story or subthread in so many movies. Yeah, and scriptwriters don't know where to take the new stories of how to offer ourselves to each other in a humane way that is also exciting. Yeah, I mean, a lot of this. Yeah, how do we write about this in the media and all of that? I mean, all like, we're the new writers. I mean, I don't know if we're all in filmmaking, but right, we're just like, we're all playing a role in this and all of that. There's 7 billion people on the planet. There's not one way to have a relationship. So, as we begin to close out, I think there's just a lot of really beautiful shares, right? Just honoring whatever is happening for you and sort of bubbling and marinating. This is a continued journey. And so know that, like I create these workshops like for you all, right? In terms of like what you're working on and like what you're moving through and needing support in. So if there are topics that are really resonant for you, let me know. And I actually had an idea for the next workshop, but I'm wondering, like, just as a quick poll, like, I'm wondering, would it be helpful for people to have something around like perfectionism and like repair after making mistakes and just like something around like, I don't know, communication needs, like, is there something around that would feel supportive for people? Because I could definitely do, we got a thing for Max. So like, like I guess maybe recovering from perfectionism in relationships and kind of exploring that. Because I will say that there's something that like as a coach, and holding space for people, whether that's with sort of past trauma or this and that, like as a human being, like I make mistakes. And and it and it I remember going into this profession like so fearful of like, what if I hurt someone? Right? Like, what if I miss them when I listen to them? Like, what if I make a mistake? Like, I don't have everyone's lived experiences. Like, I'm a human, and I like might read the situation wrong. And it's happened where I've made a mistake with a client or whatever. And one of the most important things that I've learned personally, professionally, was that like you can always repair, right? It's all about, sometimes the repair is more important than doing things perfectly. And leaning into that has given me a lot more freedom, not only in how I hold space for people, but also in terms of my like romantic partnership. And like if I fuck up, like I'm willing to make repairs and feel uncomfortable and talk it through. And I just think there's something really powerful of being like, the mistake will happen. Like it's sort of inevitable. And what does it mean to just trust our ability to repair and have those conversations? So yeah, if folks are interested, that would be happy to support in something like that. As like homework, you're welcome to like whatever you journaled around, you can actually record like your own voice where you like read some of these empowering messages to yourself, and just create like a little meditation on your phone and listen to that like every day, right? So just reimagining whatever those messages are, and just notice what it's like to hear like you are loved, you are deserving, like whatever you were saying to yourself earlier. And so you can practice with that. um yeah, so there's my information to contact me. Also, if there's anything you need additional support in, like I do one-on-one coaching and support people with these exact things. So I do offer these 1-hour coaching discovery calls where we can dive into a way I can support you. And if you want to coach together, great. If you just want to hang out and be supported during a call, that's cool too. So know that you can be in touch that way.